The camera pans across a crowded café as a young woman wheels herself toward the last empty table. A tall man reaches it first, their eyes meet, and in that moment, neither of them knows their lives are about to change forever. If you've ever wondered whether true connection transcends physical limitations, this story will answer that question in ways you never expected. Before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories that remind us what it means to be human in a world that often forgets. Emma Lawson had always considered herself practical above all else. At 28, she had adapted to life in a wheelchair with the same methodical approach she applied to everything: her job as a graphic designer, her modest apartment decorated in calming blues and grays, and her carefully curated social circle that had gradually shrunk since the accident 3 years ago. The accident itself remained a blur in her memory: rain-slicked roads, headlights, the sickening crunch of metal, and then waking up to a new reality where her legs no longer responded to her commands. On this particular Tuesday morning, Emma was running late for a client meeting. She had overslept after staying up too late finalizing designs, and now she was paying the price, rushing as much as someone in a wheelchair could rush through the busy downtown streets. She needed caffeine desperately, and the coffee shop on the corner was her last hope before the meeting. The place was packed, as it always was during the morning rush. Emma navigated between tables, apologizing as people shifted their chairs to let her pass. She spotted an empty table in the corner and made her way toward it, only to see someone else approaching from the other direction. A tall man with dark-rimmed glasses and a messenger bag slung across his chest reached the table just as she did. "I'm sorry," Emma said automatically, preparing to back away and find somewhere else. "You were here first." The man looked at her, then at her wheelchair, and Emma braced herself for what usually came next: the awkward pity, the overly helpful gestures, or worst of all, the people who pretended not to notice at all. "Actually," he said with a smile that reached his eyes, "I think we arrived simultaneously. Would you like to share?" "I'm just having a quick coffee before work." Emma hesitated. She didn't usually share tables with strangers, but she was running out of time, and something about his direct, unaffected manner caught her off guard. "Sure," she said finally. "Thanks. I'm Emma." "Daniel," he replied, pulling out a chair to make room for her wheelchair. He didn't make a show of it, didn't ask if she needed help. He simply created space as if it were the most natural thing in the world. They ordered their coffees, an Americano for him, a latte for her, and fell into surprisingly easy conversation. Daniel was an architect, it turned out, specializing in accessible design. Emma found herself mentioning her frustrations with her own apartment building, and before she knew it, they had exchanged phone numbers. Daniel offered to give her some advice on modifications that might make her daily life easier. "I'm in a wheelchair," she said bluntly as they were about to part ways, a statement she often made to ensure people understood what they were getting into with her. "Permanently. Just so you know." Daniel looked at her for a long moment, his expression thoughtful rather than pitying. "I'm an architect," he replied with equal directness. "Permanently. Just so you know." And then he smiled again, that same genuine smile that had first disarmed her, and Emma felt something shift inside her, a wall beginning to crumble. What Daniel did in the weeks that followed changed everything, though not in the dramatic, sweeping gesture way that movies had taught Emma to expect. There was no moment where he carried her up a flight of stairs or pushed her wheelchair through a meadow while inspirational music played. Instead, it was a series of small, consistent actions that gradually transformed Emma's world. He texted her the next day with links to adaptive design resources. When they met for coffee again, he brought sketches of simple modifications for her apartment. He listened when she talked about her frustrations, never rushing to offer solutions unless she asked for them. He saw her, really saw her, as a whole person, not just a woman in a wheelchair. Their friendship deepened gradually. Emma introduced Daniel to her small circle of friends, watching carefully for any signs that he was performing kindness for an audience. There were none. Whether they were alone or in a group, his behavior toward her remained consistent, respectful, attentive, but never treating her as if she were made of glass. 3 months after they met, Emma invited Daniel to her apartment for dinner. She had spent the day cooking, a hobby she had abandoned after the accident because her kitchen wasn't well adapted for her needs. But Daniel had helped her rearrange things, installing pull-down shelves and clearing space beneath the counters so she could work more comfortably. "This is amazing," Daniel said, taking a bite of the pasta she had made. "I had no idea you were such a good cook." "There's a lot you don't know about me," Emma replied, surprising herself with the flirtatious tone in her voice. Daniel looked up, his eyes meeting hers across the table. "I'd like to learn," he said simply. Later that evening, as they sat on her couch watching a movie, Emma found herself studying Daniel's profile in the flickering light from the screen. She had grown accustomed to the way people looked at her, with pity, discomfort, or exaggerated cheer, but Daniel had never looked at her that way. He looked at her the way people look at people they're interested in, and it had been so long since anyone had looked at her like that, she had almost forgotten what it felt like. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly, pausing the movie. Daniel turned to face her. "Of course. Why me?" "I mean, you're..." She gestured vaguely at him, encompassing his height, his easy physical grace, his whole able-bodied existence. "And I'm..." She pointed to the wheelchair parked beside the couch. Daniel was quiet for a moment, considering her question. "When I was in architecture school," he finally said, "one of my professors told us that the true test of a building isn't how it looks in renderings or how impressive it is from the outside. It's how it feels to move through it, how it accommodates the people who use it, how it adapts to their needs while still maintaining its essential character." He reached out and took her hand. "Emma, from the moment I met you, I've been impressed by how you move through the world. You've adapted to circumstances that would break many people, but you've maintained your essential character, your humor, your intelligence, your creativity. Your wheelchair isn't why I'm interested in you, but it's part of who you are, and who you are is someone I want to know better." Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had spent so long defining herself by what she had lost, by what she couldn't do, that she had almost forgotten there was more to her than her disability. "I'd like that too," she whispered. Their relationship evolved naturally after that night. Daniel became a regular presence in Emma's life, and she in his. He introduced her to his colleagues and his family, who welcomed her warmly. Emma found herself sketching again, something she had loved before becoming a graphic designer but had abandoned after the accident. Daniel encouraged her, hanging her drawings in his apartment and showing them proudly to friends. 6 months into their relationship, Daniel proposed a project. His firm was designing a new community center, and he wanted Emma to consult on the accessibility features. At first, she hesitated, unsure if he was offering out of pity or obligation. "I'm asking because you have expertise I don't," he explained. "I can design ramps and wider doorways, but I don't know what it feels like to navigate spaces from your perspective. This isn't charity, Emma. It's collaboration." Reluctantly, Emma agreed. She began accompanying Daniel to the construction site, pointing out issues that wouldn't have occurred to him: the placement of light switches, the height of water fountains, the texture of flooring materials, and how they affected wheelchair mobility. As the project progressed, Emma found herself becoming more invested, offering suggestions that went beyond basic accessibility to create spaces that were truly welcoming to everyone. The community center opened a year later to widespread acclaim. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the mayor specifically mentioned the innovative accessibility features, and Daniel insisted that Emma join him on stage for recognition. "I couldn't have done this without my partner," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "Emma taught me that good design isn't about accommodating differences, it's about celebrating them." Standing beside him, Emma felt a surge of pride unlike anything she had experienced since before the accident. For the first time, she saw her disability not as something that limited her, but as something that gave her a unique perspective, a valuable voice. That night, as they celebrated with champagne in Emma's apartment, now fully renovated with Daniel's help to be both accessible and beautiful, Emma found herself reflecting on how much had changed since that morning in the coffee shop. "You know," she said, "when I told you I was in a wheelchair that first day, I was trying to warn you away. I thought I was being kind, saving you from getting involved with someone broken." Daniel set down his glass and took her hands in his. "You were never broken, Emma. Different, yes. Adapting, absolutely. But never broken." He knelt beside her wheelchair, reaching into his pocket to pull out a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. I think this is it." He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "Emma Lawson, will you marry me?" Emma stared at the ring, then at Daniel's hopeful face. 3 years ago, after the accident, she had resigned herself to a life alone, convinced that no one would choose to tie themselves to someone with her limitations. She had built walls around her heart, telling herself it was for protection. But Daniel had never seen her wheelchair as an obstacle to overcome, he had simply seen her. "Yes," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will." Their wedding the following spring was a celebration of accessibility and inclusion. They held it in the community center they had designed together, with ramps instead of steps, wide aisles for Emma to navigate easily, and seating arranged so that Emma, in her wheelchair, was at the same height as Daniel during the ceremony. Emma wore a dress designed specifically for seated wear, elegant and flowing without excess fabric to get caught in her wheels. Daniel wore a suit in the same shade of blue as Emma's eyes. When they exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. "I promise to see you always as you are," Daniel said, "not as the world defines you, but as the extraordinary woman I fall in love with more deeply every day. I promise to remember that love isn't about what bodies can or cannot do," Emma replied, "but about how souls recognize each other across any distance." As they moved into their life together, Emma and Daniel faced challenges, as all couples do. There were days when Emma's chronic pain flared, leaving her frustrated and short-tempered. There were moments when well-meaning strangers directed questions about Emma to Daniel, as if she couldn't speak for herself. There were family members who wondered aloud about children, about how Emma would manage motherhood from a wheelchair. Through it all, Daniel remained steadfast, neither Emma's savior nor her caretaker, but her partner in the truest sense. He supported her when she needed it, stepped back when she didn't, and always treated her as his equal. 2 years into their marriage, Emma launched her own design consultancy, focusing on accessible graphic design for print and digital media. Her experience navigating the world from a wheelchair gave her insights that other designers lacked, and her business quickly gained a reputation for innovative, inclusive work. Daniel's architectural practice evolved as well, with accessibility becoming a cornerstone of his design philosophy rather than an afterthought. Together, they began teaching workshops on universal design, sharing their expertise and their story with students and professionals alike. At one such workshop, a young architecture student approached Emma after the presentation. "I was in an accident last year," the student said hesitantly. "I'm still adjusting to using a wheelchair. I was thinking of dropping out of the program because I couldn't imagine how I'd function as an architect now. But seeing you and Daniel together, hearing how you collaborate, it gives me hope." Emma smiled, recognizing in the student's eyes the same fear and uncertainty she had felt years ago. "The world needs architects who understand that buildings should work for everyone," she said. "Your perspective is valuable precisely because it's different." As the student walked away, Emma felt Daniel's hand on her shoulder. "You just changed that kid's life," he said softly. Emma shook her head. "No, we did. What you did that first day in the coffee shop, seeing me as a person first, not a wheelchair, that changed everything. Not just for me, but for everyone we've touched since then." Daniel knelt beside her chair, bringing his eyes level with hers as he always did when he wanted her full attention. "You know what I remember most about that day? It wasn't that you were in a wheelchair. It was that you had the most determined expression I'd ever seen as you navigated that crowded café. I wanted to know the woman with that kind of strength." Emma leaned forward to kiss him, there in the middle of the lecture hall, not caring who might be watching. "I'm glad you did," she whispered against his lips. Years passed, and Emma and Daniel's partnership continued to deepen and evolve. They faced health scares, career changes, the loss of parents, and the joy of becoming aunt and uncle to their siblings' children. Through it all, they remained each other's strongest advocates and most honest critics. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Daniel surprised Emma with a return to the coffee shop where they had first shared a table. It had changed hands several times over the years, but the corner table was still there. Daniel had arranged with the current owners to reserve it, decorating it with a small vase of Emma's favorite flowers. 10 years, Emma marveled as Daniel helped her position her wheelchair at the table. Her chair was sleeker now, custom designed with Daniel's input to better fit her body and lifestyle. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we've always been together." Daniel sat across from her, reaching for her hands across the table. His hair was beginning to gray at the temples, and fine lines had formed at the corners of his eyes from years of laughter. To Emma, he had never looked more handsome. "I have something to show you," he said, pulling out his tablet. He opened a file and turned the screen toward her. On it was a rendering of a house, modern, elegant, and clearly designed with accessibility in mind. "I've been working on this in my spare time. What do you think?" Emma studied the design, noting the seamless integration of ramps, the wide doorways, the kitchen with adjustable height counters, the bathroom with roll-in shower. "It's beautiful," she said. "One of your clients?" Daniel shook his head, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "No, it's for us. I found a piece of land just outside the city. It has that view of the mountains you've always loved, and it's close enough that we can still get to our offices easily." Emma stared at him, speechless for a moment. They had talked about building their own home someday, but it had always seemed like a distant dream. "Are you serious?" she finally managed. "Completely," Daniel replied. "We've spent 10 years making other spaces better for people like you. I think it's time we created our perfect space." Emma felt tears welling in her eyes as she looked back at the rendering. It wasn't just that the house was accessible, it was that every aspect of the design reflected how well Daniel knew her, from the studio space with northern light for her artwork to the covered porch where she could sit during rainstorms, something she had loved since childhood. "It's perfect," she whispered. They broke ground on their new home 3 months later. Emma took a sabbatical from her consultancy to be on site daily, working alongside Daniel to ensure that every detail was exactly right. They argued sometimes, as two designers with strong opinions inevitably would, but the process brought them even closer together. The house was completed the following year, a testament to their shared vision and complementary skills. On moving day, after the movers had left and they were alone in their new home, Daniel surprised Emma one more time. He led her to a room they had designated as a home office, opened the door, and stepped aside. Inside, the room had been transformed into a nursery, painted in soft yellows and greens, with a crib designed to be accessible from a wheelchair, a changing table at the perfect height, and a rocking chair modified so that Emma could transfer into it easily. "Daniel?" Emma's voice caught in her throat as she wheeled into the room, taking in every thoughtful detail. "I know we've talked about adoption for years," he said, kneeling beside her chair. "I called the agency last month. We've been approved to begin the process whenever we're ready." Emma covered her mouth with her hands, overwhelmed by emotion. They had discussed having children many times over the years, but there had always been reasons to wait: their careers, the renovation of Emma's apartment, the workshops they taught. Now, looking at the nursery Daniel had created, Emma realized he had been planning this all along, creating not just a house but a home where they could raise a family together. "Are we ready?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel took her hands in his. "I don't know if anyone is ever truly ready to become parents.